The post-lunch sessions are always a challenge, both for the speaker and for the audience, but I'm sure we'll live through this. I'd like to welcome all of you to this session, Evolution of GCC Operating Model, Delivering Value, Nurturing Innovation, and Driving Change. In this digital age, it's imperative for GCCs to reinvent themselves to stay relevant and deliver value to their parent organizations. In this panel discussion, heads of GCCs from Barclays, Novartis, and Optum share their perspectives on the evolution of the GCC operating model over the last decade while delivering sustainable value to parent organizations, nurturing innovation by leveraging startup ecosystems and driving organization-wide change through digital transformation initiatives. To tell us more and introduce the panel, I'd like to welcome on stage Mahesh Makhija, Leader Digital and Emerging Technologies, EY. I'd like to briefly introduce you to him. I'd like to introduce him to you, I beg your pardon. Mahesh is an experienced leader who has set up and scaled successful businesses globally. He leads EY India's digital and emerging technology capability. Mahesh has expertise in helping companies reimagine their businesses using the power of customer-first thinking, technology, and design. He has helped large companies set up new business models, new products targeting under-penetrated customer segments, leveraging the power of alternate data and the India API ecosystem. I'd like to now hand the mic over to Mahesh and request him to introduce us to the remaining panel members.
Yeah, hi. Good afternoon, everybody. Thrilled to be here. We have a really illustrious panel who's going to be joining us on stage, and why don't I have them come up, and then we'll do a set of introductions. So Dan, Praveen, Sandeep. So maybe we start with a round of introductions. We're going to be talking today about the operating model in GICs. How can you drive more innovation? What kind of models can be set up to drive scale, efficiency? And then how does digital and emerging technology change the game? So Praveen, over to you. If you could just go across and then introduce yourself, and then we'll start the conversation.
Sure. So hi, good afternoon. Bit of a challenge to keep you all awake after post-lunch. I'm Praveen Kumar. I'm the co-CEO for Barclays Global Service Center out here in India. It's a really exciting time for our industry. I think the topic itself has been done to death. I think every year I see the same topic, but I think hopefully we'll bring some new insights in the conversation now. So great to be here.
Dan.
Good afternoon, everyone. Dan Rose from Novartis. And I think, Praveen, if we notice any heads nodding, we'll get into jumping jacks. We'll do something. So I'm a newcomer to Novartis. I've been there about 7 months. I'm inheriting, I think, a very well-established and mature and transforming enterprise network of centers. Prior to that, I was in agriculture for about 20 years with a company called Syngenta, and I know I've got some Pune friends in the room who I know very well. And also very exciting. Earlier this week, the entire Hyderabad leadership team was with me, and we were working on strategy. And it's been really interesting over the course of the past 2 days how many of those topics are now resonating. So excited to be here.
Thanks, Dan. Sandeep Sharma from RealPage. For all you people who don't know RealPage, we are a global billion-dollar real estate data analytics technology company based out of Dallas. We're about 6,000 employees globally, and in India we're about 1,100 strong, based out of Hyderabad. I've been a newbie. Rather, one thing common across all the speakers is that we've been in our organization since the last 6-7 months, but I've spent a great amount of time in GCCs and consulting. I was with IBM and then Royal Bank of Scotland and now RealPage. Excited to be here and looking forward to speaking and sharing our experiences, but at the same time learning from all of you. And the ideology which I have personally and which we are driving with a purpose in RealPage is is a profit center mindset, and how we can move from a cost center to a profit center mindset. That's what we are going to talk about. And over to you, Mahesh.
Yep. Thanks, Sandeep. So I thought what we'll do, back to Sandeep's comment, each of these guys has just joined the company like 6 months or 7 months ago, right? And they're dealing with change. They're trying to figure out what they need to do in terms of setting the agenda, and then how do you transform, the captive, the GIC organization. So I think it'll help first to hear from them what they inherited in terms of the organization to date, and then what's their vision for the future of their organizations. So we'll go through each of these. There's a bank, there's a drugs company, and then of course there is a kind of a software products company. So different perspectives at different stages of their life cycle, small, big, medium, I guess. So let's hear from them, and then we'll dig deeper into operating models, changing the agenda, innovation. We'll go into some of those topics. So Praveen, why don't you start? You've been around the block many times in many banks, so it'll be great to hear where you are with Barclays. And
sure, thanks, Mahesh. So look, as you said, I mean, I've been with a number of financial GCCs over the course of my career. I think I'll start with an outside-in perspective. In terms of for us to be relevant and continue to have an impact, it's really about what's the external environment we are operating, as in the global organization is operating in. If you look at financial services, banking, especially Q1's been a tough quarter. Especially the markets business, unless, of course, if you're JP, you're doing very well.
The firm you just left, that's why you decided to leave?
That's right. So, but generally it's been a tough quarter for most of the markets and CIB businesses. So the external headwinds are strong. Revenue is under pressure, so if you really want to open up the jaws, you want to really, increase your ROE, where you got to either be looking to innovate and differentiate yourself with your competition, or driving costs down. And I think, when you look at either of those two, with the kind of scale and capability now that we have in GCCs out here, we have like a hugely critical role to play. So if I just take a moment to expand on that, right? So if obviously the days of arbitrage are long gone. Post that, I think with the kind of scale that we have, some organizations, especially Barclays, has adopted what we call as a transaction cycle model. So essentially what we've done is to look at the bank and split the core capabilities within the bank into a number of essentially common processes, and we have brought the technology and operations leadership for those under a single umbrella. So what that does is to look at any of the customer service, or right from customer facing to middle and back office processes, to be essentially drive scale and efficiency through that process by putting them onto common systems, common platforms, common way of doing things, and not reinventing. So if you look at any bank, typically anything between 55 to 60% of the costs tend to be on the middle and back office side. So that is a big opportunity area for you to really optimize and drive efficiencies. So that's an area that clearly there's a lot of room to make an impact. I think if you look at the front office side, again there's huge amount of innovation happening in terms of both from an customer access standpoint, so digitization and channel access, as well as the throughput in terms of digitization of the processes, and how do you actually deliver services faster. So again, on both fronts, tremendous opportunity for us to really look and identify specific capabilities that we can bring in. I think the key to all this is to really start, I think most organizations, at least in financial services, are now maturing, where they have a set of global locations, and India is kind of part of that global delivery network. So I think it's important for us to, the locations that we are in, to start calling out those capabilities that we will be the global leaders in, and have talent, have a seat at the table at commensurate with that standing. And I think that is the transformation journey that is quite exciting.
So you were talking about reconciliation earlier. So for example, wherever it's happening, the leadership is sitting in India, you're driving the agenda from India. It's not like just throwing a bunch of requirements over to get it coded, but you're actually driving the innovation platform itself.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to go into specific use cases, right? So obviously back office processes lend themselves very well because we have a lot of scale here. Typically in a bank, you'll have multiple applications, multiple systems, multiple areas where similar activities are happening, and how do you actually condense them onto the same platform, potentially drive those synergies out, host that application onto cloud, or get it eventually cloud ready. So multiple levers if you pull, you can potentially take 50% of the costs out. So the size of the prize is quite humongous. And I think that is where, for example, if I look at Barclays, I think we have some fairly aggressive plans in terms of not growing our overall headcount, but really changing the profile of what we do out of here.
Yep, great. Dan, we spoke about the entire platform model, and your thoughts on that and your agenda for Novartis would be great to hear.
Sure. The center strategy that we have is one of the key elements of the overall company transformation, and maybe just to shine a little bit of light on what that's about. Analysts will tell Novartis that we are one of the, if not the most innovative of the top end, the big global pharmaceutical companies. And over the course of the next 2 years, as an example of that, we've got something like 134, 135 launches across our 10 biggest markets. But they'll also tell us that with all of that innovation, you guys always kind of fail to hit the mark in terms of overall profitability. So what are you doing about that? So that's set the company into a multi-year transformation within which the MBS, our business service strategy, plays an essential and key part. And the center strategy obviously is a big part of that. And it's beginning to happen. If you look at the Q1 results, we proudly, from an MBS perspective, we see our names as one of the indicators or one of the reasons why the profitability has increased. So transformation well underway. Now, the question about how we're thinking about evolving the operating model, in line with the very title of this session, Innovation and Being a Leader of Transformation, with the team earlier this week, thinking about, how should we think about that evolution? One of the metaphors that came up was digital platform. And if you think about the attributes of really, really successful digital platforms, there are 7 or 8 really important ones, but kind of the top 3, I think, are very relevant for how we think about how we do what we do. And the first one is multi-sided platform. And so, what are the sides? It's connection to digital ecosystem and third party. It's connection to potential new talent as well as current talent. It's connection from the center into the incumbent client and customer base, which is the reason why we're here. Now, another way to think about how that platform comes together, and it's another attribute of digital, is the APIs, the ways of working. So how do we set all that up in a way where it is as frictionless as possible for those sides to collaborate and work together to get a win-win-win out of this platform, out of this center concept, center platform? And then the third major piece that is profound in the very successful digital platforms is positive network effect. So those individuals, the use cases coming through, is each and every one of those creating a positive experience, which then creates a further positive network effect that further justifies and elevates the center into the company strategy. So how we actually codify that through operating model is an interesting question. But in terms of a model to think about, that's how we're thinking about it.
Any more thoughts on taking out the friction from the process? It's not easy to, firstly, like you said, expose your APIs in terms of what services you're offering, how do people use them, what can work, what can't work, service levels. Any thoughts on how that's all evolving within Novartis?
Yeah, it's a really good point, and anybody in the room who's pharmaceutical, so I know we've got AstraZeneca colleagues in here, sometimes the mental picture I use is Gulliver in Lilliputian. You know the picture? He's lying on his back covered with rope. Yeah. It's just there are so many requirements in terms of how we do what we do. But there's something about empowering the center. There's something about within that containerized environment permitting more white space and more opportunity to focus on specific use case delivery and not just vertical service line delivery, as an example. I think the whole product mindset is another way to take friction out, but it is crucial. If the friction stays, we will not get the positive network effect that we think about.
Right. Sandeep, your views?
One of the things with the product company like ourselves, which is growing fast. We've done about 60 acquisitions over the last 10 years. And we've been in India since the last 10 years. And we have engineering, product engineering, 60–70% of our work happens in India. And then we have BPM, and then you have content services as well. So very diverse workforce. So one of the challenges, and there have been constant leadership changes. So one of the challenges when I came on board was purpose. And I think Ian mentioned this yesterday. And I personally believe that the success of a global capability center is directly proportionate to the sponsorship which you get from the US stakeholders or any of your stakeholders. And it's important to define that purpose. And whilst we were speaking, Praveen made a great point about that purpose needs to be aligned with our US stakeholders as well. And then putting an execution plan. So what we've done over the last 6 months is define that purpose. And our purpose is not just to make RealPage as a great place to work, but to have an innovative and profit center mindset in whatever we do. And what we've subsequently done to put that into action is defined our big four, which is around innovation, people and leadership, and engagement. And at the same time, then we have broken that down to get our leadership involved with that change, so that you have buy-in not from the top, but from the bottom as well. So there's a structure around how we need to move forward, whether it is our customer, people, or our shareholders. The other thing which we're doing is a customer-centric led transformation, which means that most of the GCCs we see is that we're doing engineering technology work, but how many of us understand the industry in its true sense? Whilst I might understand retail banking, corporate banking, do I understand the real estate business, what happens? Today in India, it is all about apartments, but in the US, it is multi-family, single family, student living, conventional living. So it's very important to understand the industry. So what we've done is that we've got everybody engaged in understanding the industry first. Once you've understood the industry, then we've broken it down into customer journeys, so that we simplify the customer journeys right from front to back. Now, it's very difficult for any organization to do a front to back costing, but given our scale and size, we can. And if we don't do it right now, we will have the same set of issues which large banks today face, that you won't know the cost of transaction. So what we are trying to drive is that mindset within our people, and not just looking at taking orders from the headquarters, but defining the way we need to engage in work. And that's what is our philosophy and transformation journey, Mahesh.
Right. Yeah, just picking up on that, I think some of the new paradigms, including digital, emerging technology, etc., I think that's kind of also pushing, GICs, capability centers, to move more, towards their customers, right? And so I wanted to just, and again, we have, different perspectives here. I think, Praveen, from your perspective, right, when you think about digital, emerging technology, and then the cost value equation which you're delivering to Barclays, how does that change the mix? How do you move the needle further on those kinds of projects?
I think especially I'm sure for many of us who are in the banking industry, it's a tough challenge, given the tons of, and there are, if I were to say, I think there are three sort of big barriers to moving fast. One is the tons of legacy that we are saddled with. We have systems from all over many different eras. In fact, coexisting growth has been through acquisitions. Therefore, many sort of duplication in many areas. The information confidentiality, I think generally the level of confidential information is very high, and what you can therefore put on a public cloud, potentially for a certain region, there might be regulatory barriers, and that's kind of the third thing, which is high level of regulation as well. So I think given all those, to embark on a digitization journey, one has to be very thoughtful, and and really look at where the most value is. I think I would say a lot of focus has been on the customer, essentially enabling the customer to have a consistent experience with the bank, no matter what channel they choose to engage you with. So if they are coming through a mobile or through an online channel or through a branch or wherever, but the experience is consistent. And not just that, if they are also, if they are personal sort of, they have a personal banking relationship with us, but also they are also working for a company and therefore engaging with us at an institutional level. Do we have a common look and feel of our entry points there? So the excess, having that as a consistent and frictionless experience,
Right.
that I think has been a huge area of investment, and where we have a significant digital team which is enabling that.
Sure.
Sort of that's kind of point number one. I think the second is that we are also, as Barclays, we have set up in Mumbai, which is supports startups in the country. So we have about 40 startups as a essentially as
This
an
is
incubator.
the RISE capability.
The RISE capability. So that essentially is a channel for us to tap into great innovation happening in the country. So if there are startups that need nurturing and we can bring them in, through RISE, we are able to at least mentor them, support them, and potentially even take them to IPO, etc. And that creates a great opportunity for us to tap into the local innovation ecosystem.
Any examples
as well.
where you've taken a startup in India and then got them into the Barclays ecosystem and used them at scale in Barclays?
So we are actually working with one of the startups, VPhrase, actually, essentially in reporting. I don't know.
Neeraj is there somewhere.
So, to see whether we can bring their solution into analytics and on the reporting side.
Yeah.
But there are many examples, lending, both domain-oriented as well as tech and analytics-oriented,
Right.
where we are exploring that.
Right.
So, I think digital clearly is a strong theme. I think there's no business which is not digital now.
Correct.
So it's not just about the customer-facing businesses, but also, as I said earlier, about the entire delivery chain, digitizing the internal processes as well, where a lot of energy and effort is going in.
For a product company, Sandeep, you talked about customer journeys, right? And the thinking obviously is that to do customer experience and customer journeys, you have to be in the market. You have to understand the culture, the customers, etc. So sitting here, how do you bridge that gap?
So three things, Mahesh, which we're trying to do. One is we had a engineering transformation where we split our engineering function into product engineering and enterprise engineering. Whilst most of the organizations have done so in a matrix, we've pulled in a third dimension as well, which is product management, and which is the missing link when we look at product management from India.
Yep.
And one of the simplest things to do is to have business analysts integrated with the engineering teams. But what we've done is that we've actually asked people to spend time in the US, understand the customer journeys, and then integrate it with technology. So that's the first thing which we are trying to do in terms of the way we shape the organization. The second thing is, and I go back to that mindset of people which has to think differently. And what we've done is that their entire employee experience itself, we've taken it digital. Right from attraction to farewell, we've actually on a journey to digitize, whether it is transport with Move and Sync or Hunger Box for food, but it is one experience for our employees, so that when the employees are experiencing digital life by themselves, they'll take it forward. The third thing which we're doing is actually almost like an India first model. Whilst we do have plans to bring our products in India, but also look at India as a place where it is a digital economy. There's a lot of digital payments happening. The adoption on mobile is much faster than what we see the other countries. So what we're also looking at India as a place where we can actually learn and implement some of the things. to Praveen's point on legacy, we're trying to see if we can make a mobile first and India first kind of a strategy.
Right.
And I think that's how we are trying to
Okay.
bridge that gap between the US and India.
Dan, what does digital mean for Novartis, and what parts of it impact the GIC here?
Sure, it's a great question, and a topic I'm happy to respond to because it's so central to what we are doing with the centers as well. So, I think like a lot of companies, we have a major digital drive facing our customers, who in many cases are healthcare professionals, but also with the patient in mind. So digitizing what that looks and feels like is crucial. Now, what I think is interesting from the perspective of all of us in the room is, you know, the extent to which we in these roles are playing influential roles in making those things happen. And what we would like to do, certainly in our strategy, is get ourselves positioned as a leader of that inside the company. Now, to do that, we've got to be credible. We've got to be authentic. We've got to have evidence that we can play in that space. And so we are not yet sold as saying that we want to reach out past the boundaries of this company, reflecting on the reality that the enterprise that we manage today, so, you know, everything around the potential impact of automation, of the insights available with the data set that we presently manage, that we've built up through these legacy archetypes of global business services, there is so much potential simply sat there that we should be tapping into and becoming the visible experts of, including user experience of everything that we offer, that we want to get that brand in the company, and then we want to be, you know, your wingman for producing, you know, the digital breakthrough that helps innovate with patients and doctors. So we're there. We have the capabilities in our centers. They're definitely tapped into with commercial colleagues. But from a strategic entry point, we really want to be the example in our own house of what good digital looks like.
Okay. And that kind of segues into the other conversation. As you look for new technologies, digital skills, etc., there's obviously a war for talent, right? It's not easy to get talent. And it's probably the single biggest driving factor of success, apart from, of course, sponsorship and ways of working, etc. But do you have the right people, and can you solve the problems of the parent company? So I'd love to get your views on how do you attract talent, what are you guys doing differently, and what works, what doesn't work in the Indian context. So all of you, Richard.
All right. So one of the things we're trying to do is build RealPage as a brand. I think everybody needs to know or understand what we do as a product company. So one of the things we're actually doing is to increase the visibility of the brand. What we're also trying to do is the entire experience of our talent within the organization, and how can we better that experience, because one of the single most important thing is to look at referrals and you get the right mindset. Third is we are also looking at expanding and looking at how we can reach to our talent much faster. So one of the things is, do we need to continue in Hyderabad? Do we need to look at other locations? And if we look at other locations, do we build? Do we buy? And within buying, even a radical thought like, can we have co-working spaces? We're not a financial services organization. So can we have co-working spaces which are closer to our talent? Because one of the biggest frustrations of the talent is travel commute. And I feel that it's great to be there closer to our talent. And the last thing is innovation and looking at, and we just concluded our Tech Expo and Hackathon. And now, given the success of that hackathon, we invited some school students as well. So we're nurturing the talent right from there, and rather interestingly, a 10th grader won the hackathon. He built Alexa integration where you can pay rents through Alexa. So it's very interesting to now look at, can we do a collaborathon, which means that Philippines, India, and US do the hackathon, at the same time, and they have teams which constitutes of all the three. So I think it's interesting times to attract talent, but what we are focusing on is experience. Second is reach, and the way we hire. And I think those are the three which at least from a RealPage perspective, we are doing.
Okay. Thoughts on talent?
Yeah, it's a great question, and you know, maybe what I'd like to connect it to is your point about purpose, right? So one of the things that we have found extremely effective in the interactions that we have, and you know, I'll use university as an example, is when we bring a group of individuals who are, you know, not just center but also from the working parts of the business, and express who we are in a way that really is about our purpose that people can connect to. So, you know, improving and extending the lives of patients as sort of the tagline for why we should be an attractive employer for you, is a mechanism that we found to be very effective in terms of attracting people, this point about purpose. The second thing, or an additional thing I think is so crucial for us, and it's kind of like a Nasscom topic, is the influence of the local ecosystem itself. So as a great example, I got a phone call, I don't know, about a month and a half ago, and our leader in Kuala Lumpur called me and she said, Dan, I just read that AstraZeneca is coming into KL, and it's going to be all about robotics and data science and analytics, and oh my gosh, it's a big threat. And I kind of smiled and I said, well, it's either a threat or it's an opportunity for you and the head of AstraZeneca to go sit in a university and talk about this skills build out that we're all going to need in KL for that capability to, you know, to be legitimate and to build and attract the right talent. So I think that's another big piece, which is in all of the places we operate, especially, you know, for us in Hyderabad, having good, solid connection, and not just by ourselves, but, you know, with a federation of high-impact players to make sure that with the talent pipelines are being developed the way we hope.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I think if I were to just add to that, you know, I think what we are trying to encourage in our talent and people that we bring in is much more of an outcome orientation. You know, that activity is good, but outcomes matter. So unless, you know, you focus on the outcomes, and in order to get to the right outcomes, I think the three sort of things which are super critical. Number one, I think, and Sandeep actually touched on that earlier, is the customer orientation. You know, does everyone, you know, right down to the developer and everyone on the floor really understand that the business they are serving, how does it make money? You know, and they'll be surprised at how many times that's actually, you know, people don't quite get that. You know, so that customer orientation, the commercial orientation to support that, you know, that are we doing activity which really is anyone, you know, really bothered about it? I think a great test which I always tell people is to really see, you know, that if they were not to turn up tomorrow and for a week maybe, you know, how soon and who is the first person who is going to call them.
It's a dangerous experiment.
Yeah. So it's quite, you know, when you think about it and inspect, and you know, if you're not clear, then that is clearly gives you some insight. And I think the third thing is really focus on continuous learning with the way the industry is moving, and you know, really encourage the talent that we bring in, that we have, to have that T-shaped mindset. You know, and by that what I mean is that, you know, really have that strong eye of the T, you know, which is like you are clear about what is your core expertise and what you bring to the table, and no matter what level you are, you got to be clear about, you know, what subject matter expertise or capability you bring in, and have that T, which is, you know, the adjacencies to the business you are serving, the technology you are working in. Do you really understand how that connects with the larger system? I think if you get those pieces in place and simplify the organization, create those agile groups, you know, with the right level of empowerment, then essentially you land in a place where you have essentially a startup culture replicated in the construct of a large organization, and I think that to me is success.
Okay. So we're coming up to around 7 minutes, 8 minutes. So one last question, and then we'll open it up to questions from the floor, was about how do you measure all this, right? We say a lot of good stuff, but then how do you know that you're moving the needle? What metrics do you guys use? So that's important. If you could just maybe just go across, keep it short, just quickly, what are the top 3 metrics which you guys use to measure the scale, pace of innovation?
I think, you know, if you look at the cockpit of an aircraft, you see, the pilots can't really look at all the dials, and they look at the T in front of them. So the T for us is NPS. Um, every team can influence NPS. It's just that we need to find that connect. Risk is a big factor. Engagement, people.
Right.
Are we engaged doing a flash survey or a dipstick? There are multiple avenues to do so. Cost definitely plays a big role. So that's what we do. And
But
right now,
NPS is your top metric.
yes, and what we're also doing is to ensure that we are actually digitizing their experience. So in BPM team, we've actually gave this problem statement to our hackathon folks, and they came out with dashboards, which we are now taking it to the mobile, so that our stakeholders can see the trends on what the volume is, how many have we done. So you don't need to keep them posted, it's on the tap.
Dan?
Yeah, I'm going to fully support the NPS viewpoint. If you've got a positive NPS, anything above 0, we've got one little group or big group inside our organization that's achieving a 60, which is like world class. But if you're on NPS, if you've got good engagement scores with the staff, and you're making a real impact on the P&L, you're going to be winning, I think.
Yeah, I think it's no different actually. I think I just like to think about them in terms of sort of leading or lagging indicators, so what's sort of outside versus inside. So for example, NPS, great indicator, what's eventually the net impact to the customer. But likewise, engagement scores, etc., really give you a sense of, if the organization is engaged, people are really, engaged with the content of what they do, NPSs will go up. So I think I kind of try to look at them in sort of both those dimensions.
Okay. Questions? There you go. Can you get the mic there, please? Can we get her a mic?
Hello?
There's one here.
Yeah, I'm
Oh, sorry. Okay, go ahead. And there's another question. Yeah, go ahead.
So my question is that with large GCCs like yours, Barclays, there's a lot of focus on the automation as well as the new age skills. So clearly, you have a lot of people, which may not be well versed with the new digital way of working. So what are the things that you're doing to sort of change their skill profile so that you are able to employ them fairly well?
I think that's a great question. Clearly, as I said earlier, there's a huge need for continuous learning and investment in learning and development, and that continues to be a massive area of focus for us. So whether it's plural site or whatever, sort of micro targets we can set people, that don't think about what's the 2-year-long program I'm going to do, but really break it down and have micro ambitions, micro targets, that this is what I'm going to learn in this week, and that's kind of helping it break down and engage with those topics really helps. So what I've seen is that where we've had success is when we've created capacity for people to invest in their own learning, make sure that they have some time during the month or during the week where they can actually take that time for their own development, and then providing them with all the tools and technologies to support that. So absolutely, super critical, and there are of course people who will engage with that topic and some who won't, and but that's life.
Yeah, if I can just add to it, one of the things, and Praveen touched upon plural site, you can have Coursera or LinkedIn as well, which is continuous learning. But the other thing which also helps is getting them involved in that change. And the way we are actually doing is we are getting them to look at and incentivizing them. And if possible, there are tools available, you can gamify it as well. And the other thing is, if your stakeholders are really happy about the automation and the transformation journey, I'm sure there is more work which is coming to the GCCs. So I think it's cyclical. What you need to automate with our people who can automate, and then get some more from our stakeholders. So I think that's worked really well.
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Tapsi from the Digital Strategy Formulation team at EY. So my question is that now everybody wants to invest more and more into emerging technologies. So how do you prioritize that what needs the first investment? And then secondly, how do you ensure that it fits into the current operating model?
So I'll take a shot at that first because this is something that's very relevant in our strategic thinking. So the model that we are starting to shape up to actually activate that sort of innovation pipeline is sort of like a 70-20-10 thing, where 70% of where you're spending your OpEx is all around the core environment. 20% is continuous improvement, and a good healthy 10% is kind of earmarked for investigation of, exploration of, and identification of sort of breakout innovation. Now, the dilemma, certainly, that I've experienced in this company as well as in previous companies, and I think we heard it in an earlier presentation today, is often innovation becomes a frustrating exercise for people because you do stuff, it ends up in evaluation, and it kind of goes nowhere. So the way we're looking at that model is with a dedicated team who are focused on sort of 10x breakout innovation. But they will have a massive obligation of being influencers. So in other words, it will not be helpful to any of us if we emotionally commit to some innovation that a service line or another sponsor who must absolutely be part and parcel of the solution is not part of. So it's having the right investment portfolio around it, it's having the right connections, dedicated team, for us anyway, but also making sure we are connected to the operating environment so the full system can benefit from the innovation, and that's one of the gaps that we often see.
Hi. So my question is, I think in India, if you look at it, we have a critical mass in terms of number of employees. We have the right talent. The question is that when these large and exciting strategic initiatives are driven, they're mostly driven and strategized at the head offices. And in India, we do the execution. Are you seeing any change in this aspect, as in the India GICs or GCCs are getting more empowered, they have their own budgets, their own spending, their own decision making to drive their agenda? Or do we still have to follow what the head office tells us?
Yeah, maybe I can answer that. So there is certainly change happening on two dimensions, I would say, right? So there is certainly opportunity for us to drive change where it's, I would say, horizontal, in the sense where that change impacts the entire body of work that gets done here. So for example, if I take, at Barclays, we are sort of leading the engineering excellence for Barclays globally from India. By that what I mean is that automating the process of delivering technology, whether it's what's the right tool chain that we want to use, what's the DevOps practices, test automation, et cetera, the engineering of delivering a solution that, how a technology team delivers, that center of excellence, et cetera, is kind of led from here. Investment decisions are made here. The choice of tools is being made here, or at least is starting to be made here. So that's one dimension which kind of is horizontal. I think to the other point that we discussed briefly earlier is the ownership to a function and having that P&L being driven from here. Again, that's starting to happen, and in our case, certain transaction cycles are being led from here, and that then is a global function being led from here, no matter if there are, obviously for resiliency reasons, there might be teams in other parts of the world, but those budgets, those strategy for that function is starting to be led from here. I think that change is only sort of in the early stages now, but I think that is where you will see some more momentum picking up. The direction is certainly there.
Yeah, maybe if I can build, and for us, we are probably in the dilemma part of the journey, that you're pointing at. The evidence will be that leadership with the right authority and surrounded by the individuals and teams with the right skills and competencies, and an enterprise portfolio of work that is very relevant and substantial in terms of a measurement of the total amount of work in that area, and a shift away from FTE counting and arbitrage thinking into true ROI generation. When you start to see that happening, it is happening. Now that all being said, what I would say, I say this to my leadership team who are largely set in this direction, there's going to be an element of as well, you've got to take it yourself, right? So the thinking in the center has to be strategic and compelling, and it must continue, right? So, I think the global HQs that will do the work, will get the sponsorship, will get those things happening, but also, the flywheel has to turn, right? So, and it is you guys are probably maybe a bit further along, but it's a challenging transformation.
No, I think we were speaking before the session, and Dan actually made this point about how siloed we function in the GCCs. And that's why you see the variability in the sponsorship as well. But if you actually have the sponsorship right level, and one of the simplest example is travel. And when it comes down to travel, either we plan but we don't execute, or we haven't planned enough. And I feel that cross-pollination of stakeholders from the headquarters to India and from India to the headquarters plays a very critical role in increasing the sponsorship. And once the sponsorship is increasing, then you'll be able to get what you're asking for, whether it is the budgets in terms of what you want to do in terms of engagement, or whether you want to execute to a new tech stack, or you're driving the customer initiatives sitting right here. So I feel that it is evolving. Are we there yet consistently across all GCs? Probably not. But I think the leadership is, and we see a lot of success, at least to some of the GCCs I know of, is driving a lot of success in terms of India. And the org structure lines are shrinking. If you look at the head of a GCC today, it's CEO -2. Previously, it used to report into multiple lines and then go into the COO or the CIO. And today, we have the executives who are reporting in directly to the COO of a function who's part of the board. So it's very important in terms of what value do they see. And that's why I go back to the question that, purpose is important to align to.
Okay, I think our time's up. Can we take one more question? Or? Time's up. Okay, sorry guys. You guys have been a great post-lunch audience. So thank you very much, and thanks, Praveen.
I'd like to thank Mahesh and the panel members. I'd like to request Mahesh to present a small token of our appreciation to each of the panelists. And on behalf of Nasscom, we'd like to present a small token to Mahesh as well. Thank you, sir, for sharing that session.